Hi, I'm William Stewart, co-founder of Teleios. Welcome back to our verse-by-verse study on the book of Mark. We're in chapter 9, and we just got through the healing of the possessed boy of a demon, a bit of a gruesome demonstration of that demon's power, but God or Christ healed him and moves on. And the text goes in verse 30, they departed to the sea, passed through Galilee. This is the area around the Sea of Galilee to the north of Jerusalem, northern part of Israel, and where Christ spent really most of his ministry. He was not wanting that any man should know it at this point, as we've talked about. After the rejection by the Jews, and especially the Jewish leadership, he was ministering somewhat under the radar, at least trying, though huge crowds generally still followed him. He still had to fight with the Pharisees, and he's focusing on teaching his disciples, preparing them for when he goes away, as we'll see in a second. For he taught his disciples and said to them, the Son of Man is delivered. So here is that term again, Son of Man, Christ's most used term for himself from the book of Daniel, chapter 7. I think here representing indicates the representative man. He's representing man before God as a worthy sacrifice. He's not calling himself Son of God as, again, a way to stay, I think, under the radar without being antagonizing the Pharisees too much, who would then take the fact that he's calling himself Son of God, making himself out to be a deity, which would be a threat to the emperor, who also calls himself a deity, or at least after they die, and might bring a charge of sedition. Romans are very sensitive about people who might take power. That's because people tried it all the time. Less so around the time of Christ, but there was a history of it for sure. So the Son of Man must be delivered into the hands of men, that they will kill him, and after he is killed, he shall rise the third day. Didn't understand, but they were too afraid to ask. So you could imagine the person with whom they have depended upon and followed and been taught by this person the past 3 years almost suddenly says he's going to be killed. And they don't know why, and he's going to raise. Well, dead people don't typically do that. So they must have been confused. Christ repeats this message at least 3 times before going to Jerusalem the final time. And I don't think they really completely understood till the day of his crucifixion. But it obviously caught their attention, and I think scared them. Of course, this was the intention of God all along, to send his Son to die, to take the punishment for man's sin, and then to bring him back to life and to allow man to access this new life through the forgiveness of sins and being created a new person through the regeneration, and doing this by faith. So God, being a just God, demanded that punishment, but being a loving God, provided Christ as a workaround to man's own sin, to believe in what Christ had graciously done for them and dying and taking the punishment on himself for man's sin. So he came to Capernaum. Capernaum is on the north shore of the Sea of Galilee. Again, this is probably the town where he spent the most time and did the most miracles. Being in the house, we're not sure which house this is. He may have rented a house or stayed with somebody. What was it that you disputed among yourselves along the way? So Christ heard something or knew something, but the disciples didn't want to answer because they knew what they were talking about was pretty self-focused. Who among them was the greatest? So they shut up. So he sat down with them. This must have been a separate time here in verse 35, and said to them, if any man desires to be first, he shall be the last of all and the servant of all. So this is opposite of what people would teach in society. If you want to be the head man, you have to act like the head man and lead. Now, I think modern leadership theory teaches that you're a servant of all people as the boss, but that has not always been the case. And for Christ, it's not the case here that you're the servant of all. So he took a child up in his arms and said, "Whoever shall receive one of such children in my name receiveth me. Whoever shall receive me receiveth not me, but him that sent me." Otherwise, if you want to please God, you'll receive somebody like a child. Now, I think he's not talking about children per se here. That could be controversial. He's talking about the low-life believers in society, perhaps the poor, perhaps the uneducated, um, people of humble means, intellectually, physically, emotionally, um, financially, and but believe, but you receive them. I think he's talking about other people who believe here, but maybe not. That could be controversial. Otherwise, you're a person who is humble enough to interact with people who are not elites. So in the gospel times, why is this important? Well, this is Christ. Christ came as a humble servant of all, and these people were following in his footsteps in faith. They had to be faithful, they had to believe and follow. So they should be acting like Christ was acting. And if they're not really believing in Christ. So I think that's the distinction there. Now, how does this apply to people in the church? Well, remember in our biblical Bible study methods, commands in the Gospels don't directly apply to those in the church. We find those in, as we've said, between Romans to Revelation 3 and the New Testament, the apostolic letters. It says in the apostolic letters to be humble. Okay, and the word here in the original Greek is great, tapinophronesis, to think like a low person, low think. Otherwise, for a person who of humble means has to be careful and vigilant to survive, to get money, to realize when they're in danger, to being taken advantage of. They have to read the signs of people in their face, their voice. An arrogant person doesn't do that. They're not careful, and they're not careful about signs they receive from other people, and they trounce on other people's feelings, and they miss clues that might bring them down, whether it be investing in business and harming other people, for which they will pay later. So as Christians, we should low think, be careful, be in tune, and recognize other people's feelings and thoughts, and analyze situations and live carefully, as it says in Ephesians 5, 15 or 16, that we can not only prosper in our family life and business and be a good testimony to others, but we can be careful servants of God. Okay. So what we learn here, Christ is again given the hard information, but glorious information to the disciples that he must die and be resurrected. And they're in anxiety here, not understanding and don't want to ask. And then, as a follower of Christ in the Gospels, they must serve other people. They must have the attitude out of faith in following Christ as Christ had, to be a servant. Okay, thank you for joining me today. We'll continue with Christ's last year of ministry next time. I hope you'll join me then.